Good evening and welcome to California Today. I'm David Lam, sitting in for Liang Zhang. Here's a look at some of our top stories. The University of California system might be allowed to take political sides. A UC professor analyzed what the changes could mean for faculty and students alike. Facebook is allowing for users in Ukraine to post certain violent speech. The move is against its hate speech policy, and one analyst characterized it as a misstep. Students across the state are able to unmask for the first time in 2 years. One teacher shared how pandemic mandates led her to resign and start her own education program. In what could be a massive policy change to neutral education institutions, entire departments at the University of California system may be allowed to take sides in politics. Last Friday, I spoke with one UC professor who told me about his opposition to the proposed policy. In recent months, the University Committee on Academic Freedom proposed to allow its school departments to issue and endorse political statements.
My reaction when I saw the proposed policy, and I first found out about it about 2 weeks ago, was shock.
Ethan Miller is a computer science professor at UC Santa Cruz. He says each professor has the right to their own opinions on political statements, but says if an entire department is issuing it, it will be detrimental.
If I, as an individual, say something about Ukraine and a Russian student says, well, I don't agree with that, they can either discuss it with me or just avoid me. But if a department takes a position on Ukraine, now a Russian student might feel threatened taking a class in that department.
The Committee on Academic Freedom wrote in its proposal that department statements will not be representing the universities. While such statements are sometimes ill-advised and have the potential to chill or intimidate minority views, departments should not be precluded from issuing or endorsing statements, as long as they include a disclaimer and make allowances for minority views.
Or a colleague, perhaps a colleague from Russia, might feel threatened by the department's stance. And that's particularly important if this is a colleague who happens to be a junior faculty member without tenure, or happens to be a visiting lecturer or any kind of a non-tenure track professor. This can be a problem for those people. And it can mean they have to shut up because the department has said something.
Miller said local governments may terminate university funding over politics. In February, legislators voted to terminate funding for the University of Wyoming's Gender and Women's Studies program, according to The Hill. Legislators said the program was biased and had one-sided education.
I don't want to see that happen at the University of California, where the legislature decides, we don't like your department's politics, we're going to defund you. But they did exactly that.
The University of California is the overarching system in charge of 10 schools, such as UCLA, Berkeley, and Davis.
But if the department says something, you can't say, oh, but it's just those two people. No, it's the whole department. And that's the big difference. That's what I want to make very clear, is that it is not individuals that are an issue.
He says schools that are private, like Stanford, are allowed to have political statements since they are privately owned. But it's different for public schools, which are funded by taxpayers. NTD reached out to the UC Board of Regents for comment. David Lam, NTD News, California. Facebook is allowing for hate speech in certain contexts. The change in its policy is in response to the conflict in Ukraine. One analyst characterized it as a misstep.
Facebook's parent company Meta will allow for users in Ukraine to issue death threats under certain conditions. Internal Facebook emails obtained by Reuters said the social media company will allow for people to call for violence against Russian President Vladimir Putin and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. One analyst called it a misstep.
This seems like a misstep from Meta. They have explicit policies that prohibit this type of activity, specifically calls for violence on their platform. So I think it shows inconsistency with previous policy, and it shows that they're really making decisions in the moment. This is kind of a crisis response, and it's very reactive in a situation where we have a developing conflict.
A Meta spokesperson said in a statement that the company temporarily made allowances for forms of political expression that would normally violate our rules, like violent speech, such as death to the Russian invaders. One email said posts of violence will be allowed unless they contain details like location and method. The email was sent to content moderators about changing hate speech policies.
We don't really have any idea about how they're going to enforce this on a large scale. So that's really kind of my second piece of concern. ISD and other research organizations work tirelessly to try and highlight and expose where this type of online harm is happening and where platforms have made promises about enforcing policies that they're not holding up. So I think our research has shown time and time again that when these policy decisions are made, the more carve-outs there are and the more kind of complicated the policy development is, the harder it is for them to enforce against it properly.
Original documents allowed for such posts from countries in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. On Friday, Meta walked back the decision to only allow Ukraine posters to make threats.
I think the opaque nature of Meta and some of these other platforms is one of the key problems here. So we don't really know what this decision is being driven by. It could be that they are seeing a high volume of this type of content online. It could be that they're under pressure from external stakeholders. We don't really know.
Facebook will allow violent speech against Russian soldiers in the context of the military operation. Russia's embassy wrote on Twitter, users of Facebook and Instagram did not give the owners of these platforms the right to determine the criteria of truth and pit nations against each other. Russia opened a criminal case against Meta on Friday. Meta's Global Affairs President Nick Clegg said the company is monitoring the conflict closely and constantly upgrading their policies.
California's statewide school indoor mask mandate ended on March 12th. Many students across the state can unmask while in school for the first time since the start of the pandemic 2 years ago. NTD's Cynthia Kai spoke to a former public school teacher to reflect back on pandemic mandates.
Schools across California now need to consider whether or not to modify their masking rules following the March 12th expiration of the school indoor mask mandate. One educator from Shasta County reflected back on how the pandemic and school masking mandates led her to start her own education program.
Last year was difficult as a teacher. I was harassed after showing up to a board meeting and advocating for in-person instruction, just daily harassment because I would not enforce masks in my classroom. And I was given a written reprimand the first of my 15 years of teaching for not enforcing them and putting students at risk, in their opinion.
Fowler said she attended her former school district's board meeting at the beginning of March. She heard the district would lift the mask mandate on March 12th, in line with the statewide policy.
Knowing in the back of my mind that she had already pulled the religious and medical exemptions for students already in the district, it was just another, you can say, moving the goalpost.
In August 2021, she made the decision to resign. She disagreed with both the mandates and the direction public school curriculums are heading.
Honestly, it was just until last year that it just got really bad. And I see the indoctrination, the state testing, what the kids are presented to read and answer questions.
She and her husband, Chad Fowler, originally dreamed of opening a public charter school, but the charter school moratorium and education budget cuts pushed them to instead launch a tutoring program called Roots Farm. The program teaches students, in addition to math, science, history, and language arts, to cherish nature and skills such as farming, crafting, music, and more.
We want to teach children to love and value. I mean, we are still the most free and fortunate country in the world, and it's because of that Constitution and the Declaration, everything that our patriots went through to get us here. So we need to ensure that it's there for generations to come.
Fowler explained that they wanted to offer full-time private education, support parents who choose to homeschool their children, and provide families an alternative education option, especially in light of pandemic-related mandates. She and her husband are both former public school teachers. Fowler says they're still holding on to their dream of opening their own school one day. Reporting in Shasta County, Cynthia Kai, NTD News.
Speaking of responses to school masks and pandemic lockdowns, San Francisco Mayor London Breed announced the new replacements for the school board in a ceremony on Friday. Parents, local leaders, and members of the public attended as the new members were sworn in. Breed expressed optimism with the future of the city's education system.
After a successful recall vote of 3 San Francisco school board members, San Francisco Mayor London Breed swore in her chosen replacements on Friday.
It's time for the schools in this city, our public school system, to get back to the basics of educating our children.
Ann Shu, Lainey Matamidi, and Lisa Weissman Ward have been appointed and were sworn in during a ceremony at Galileo High School. All 3 replacements are mothers who have kids currently enrolled in San Francisco public schools. Ann Shu was actively involved with the recall effort.
I am hopeful for the future, and I know that our kids, our educators, and our public school system will be in good hands.
Last month, 3 school board members were voted out in a decisive average of 75% in favor. Organizers behind getting the vote on the ballot said they wanted to recall all 7 members, but only 3 were eligible. Breed was in favor of the recall. In a press release, she stated she had spoken with local parents and educational groups to help inform her decision in appointing replacements. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
Gas prices are on almost everyone's minds right now. As the peak isn't yet in sight, calls for stopping California's gas tax are picking up. NTD's Miguel Moreno has a story.
Californians are paying the prettiest penny for gas in the country. AAA says people are paying an average of $5.74 per gallon. Some are even charged over $6 per gallon. Trying to suppress the cost, some California lawmakers are proposing a tax cut on gas.
It's time to give Californians some much-needed relief.
Republican Assemblyman James Gallagher wants the gas tax suspended for 6 months. That means Californians would pay half a dollar less per gallon.
Now, that's not going to bring prices down to reasonable levels by any stretch of the imagination, but it will help.
The lawmakers said they would propose the bill on Monday to the Assembly, which could suspend the tax as soon as everyone, including the governor, greenlights the bill. Governor Gavin Newsom has said that he wants a gas tax rebate. Under that plan, checks would be sent to Californians who own cars. In a statement to NTD News, the governor's communications director said the Republicans' proposal can be manipulated to help line the pockets of petro-dictators and oil companies who are benefiting from the spike in oil prices across the world. But it's unclear when the rebate checks would be sent to Californians. Making its way up the Georgia legislature is a bill that would suspend the gas tax. It's already passed the House. And Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia is for a 1-year suspension on the gas tax. CBS reports that Democratic governors from Colorado, Michigan, and other states have sent a joint letter to Congress in support of suspending a federal 18-cent per gallon tax. According to reports, critics of these tax cuts say the savings might not be passed on to the customers and that the suspensions could disrupt funding for city projects. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Coming up, the former director of sports medicine at San Jose State is facing a lawsuit. Female plaintiffs allege he touched them without their consent. Today's date is 314, meaning it's Pi Day. And the mathematical constant is literally synonymous with many people's favorite dessert. We'll have a look at one bakery's approach to the day. That and more here on California Today. A former director at San Jose State University has been under fire for alleged sexual assault on female athletes. NTD's Thomas Christian gives us an update.
San Jose State's former director of sports medicine faces charges of civil rights violations for allegedly sexually assaulting student athletes while treating them for injuries. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Scott Shaw, a 54-year-old athletic trainer, groped 4 female university athletes. The events in question took place from 2017 to 2020 and were described as without their consent and without a legitimate purpose. Shaw faces up to 6 years in prison. The charges come after earlier allegations associated with San Jose State, in which more than a dozen female swimmers had accused Shaw of sexual misconduct. An investigation conducted by the university covering those previous events from 2006 to 2009 cleared Shaw of any wrongdoing. In a 2021 settlement, SJSU agreed to pay $1.6 million to another 13 female student athletes. Thomas Christian, NTD News, California.
Elon Musk warned yesterday that inflation is hitting his businesses. He said Tesla and SpaceX are facing pressure, especially in the areas of raw materials and logistics. In a tweet, Musk mentioned an article about how the Ukraine-Russia conflict has sent commodity prices to their highest levels since 2008. That includes the price of metals used in cars, from aluminum to the high-grade nickel needed for EV batteries. And while these metals aren't currently the object of Western sanctions, some shippers and suppliers are steering clear of Russian goods. This, as car makers are already reeling from a chip shortage and higher energy prices. Tesla's shares have lost about 25% year to date. Last week, it raised the price of several of its vehicles, including its Model 3 long-range sedans. Orange County is building its first cemetery for firefighters and police officers. Officials say it's a way of honoring the sacrifices sworn police officers and firefighters made for the county.
Orange County plans to set aside 10 acres of land to build a cemetery for veteran firefighters and police officers. Supervisor Don Wagner said he believes it to be the first of its kind in the nation. Wagner said at the March 8th Board of Supervisors meeting, the idea here is to say thank you. According to the proposal, police officers and firefighters who spent over 10 years risking their lives or served Orange County residents for more than 50% of their career would qualify for being buried there. But the exact entrance criteria are still being discussed. The proposed cemetery would use a small portion of Anaheim's Gypsum Canyon site, where a state veteran cemetery is currently planned to be built. Before the project can move forward, the plan needs study and approval from the county's cemetery district.
For math lovers, it's a chance to celebrate pi, the circular number that goes on forever. But for others, it's a chance to eat guilt-free pie. And today is the day. NTD's Adelina Asaltane takes a bite out of this geometrical-inspired holiday.
Today is Albert Einstein's 143rd birthday. But it's not about Albert, it's about pies, all kinds of pies. Let's see some favorites for today.
For most people, if they hear that pi is transcendental, they probably won't think of numerical characteristics, but flavor instead. One Bay Area baker knows about both of those qualities.
Today it's Pi Day. Pi Day is 3.14.
It doesn't take a mathematical equation to deduce what flavor of pie one likes best.
Do what you like. Do you like sweet or savory? Do you like tart or not tart?
Sue said she uses organic flour and local in-season fruit for their pies.
But if you like something more tart, then try the triple berry or brown sugar pineapple, which is surprisingly good.
Sue moved to California after having a successful pie business in New York City. She is the supplier for many bakeries, including a local hotspot, Chromatic Cafe, that just got a new flavor.
The new flavor is coffee cheesecake. We've mixed cold brew syrup into the cheesecake, and then we've sandwiched that cheesecake between 2 layers of espresso powder.
I have mandarin marzipan, I have pineapple, triple berry, apple, and I think I have chocolate pecan too, actually. I have a chocolate cheesecake with espresso, actually.
I like pie. Apple pie is the best one for me, and blueberry pie.
What day is today?
Pie Day, but I didn't know that. Yeah.
Did you know?
No, not at all. My favorite pie, I think, is apple pie.
Happy Pie Day!
It's good, right?
Even if it's a Monday, everyone is coming out to get a piece of pie. Adelina Soltane, NTD News, California.
Now back to NTD's Thomas Christian for a sports update.
I'm Thomas Christian, giving you the California Today Sports Roundup. Tomas Tatar scored in regulation and again in the shootout to lift New Jersey over Anaheim in Newark, New Jersey. Nico Dawes made 33 saves and stopped both attempts in the shootout for the Devils, who have won 3 of their last 4. Troy Terry scored, and Anthony Stolarz made 39 saves for the Ducks, who have lost their first 3 games of their 5-game road trip. Devils 2, Ducks 1. Timo Meyer had a goal and 2 assists, and Thomas Hertl scored twice, as host San Jose beat Los Angeles for the second time in 3 days. Sharks goalie Adin Hill made 29 saves, his first action in nearly 2 months, for his second shutout of the season. Matt Nieto and Jonathan Dahlen also scored, while Nick Bonino had 2 assists for the Sharks, who snapped an 0-2-1 run with Thursday's 4-3 overtime win at Los Angeles. Cal Peterson was roughed up early, allowing 3 first-period goals and finished with 22 saves for the Kings, who have dropped back-to-back games after winning 8 of 10. Sharks 5, Kings 0. Naomi Osaka was rattled by a heckler early in her second-round match against Veronika Kudermetova on Saturday and never recovered as she fell 6-0, 6-4 at Indian Wells. After being broken in the first game, a fan shouted, "Naomi, you suck," and Osaka could later be seen wiping away tears. After the match, the event's 2018 champion addressed the crowd on center court, saying the incident reminded her of when Venus and Serena Williams were booed at the tournament in 2001. Osaka has been open about her struggles with mental wellness in the past and took a break from the sport following her upset loss at last year's US Open. She said she was in a great place emotionally coming into the tournament. Kudermetova stayed locked in despite the drama and continued her hot start to the year, outplaying the 4-time Grand Slam champion even when she regrouped in the second set. It's not California, but it is an NBA all-time record. San Antonio coach Greg Popovich is not one to call attention to himself, but his players made sure he basked in the limelight for at least a few minutes after he became the NBA's all-time leader in regular season coaching wins Friday night. The Spurs players kept Popovich on the court to soak in the applause from the home fans after his team rallied for a 104-102 win over the Utah Jazz. He looked uncomfortable amid the attention, but finally cracked a smile. His grin was about more than just a record, as the Spurs rallied from 15 points down in the fourth quarter to give Popovich the record. San Antonio had been 0-33 in games it was trailing entering the final period. The victory, Popovich's 1,336, pushed him past Don Nelson. Popovich is in his 26th NBA season, all with the San Antonio Spurs. As always, I'm Thomas Christian, and thanks for tuning in.
And that's all for tonight. You can join us again on California Today every weekday at 8:30 p.m. If you have any news tips or ideas for a show, or you just want to let us know how we're doing, our email is california.today@ntd.com. I'm David Lamb. Have a wonderful evening.